Recently, we've been making a 5-part series about tool sharpening by hand. Not because I don't like machines, I obviously do, but because a large portion of our audience sharpens by hand with stones or diamonds or sandpaper. So this series is designed to help make that process faster and more convenient so you're less likely to put it off and work with dull tools. I'll link to all the videos in the series in the description below this video. Today we'll talk about strops, particularly how to make one yourself. I often just strop on a piece of leather near my bench, but some folks prefer a backing on their leather so they can mount it in a vise or to a sharpening board like the one we made in part 2 of this series. First, you need some leather. Why leather? Because a good piece of vegetable tanned cowhide or horsehide has unique properties. One side is rough, which makes it ideal for holding abrasive pastes, much better in my opinion than bare wood or MDF. The other side is silky smooth to the touch, but it also contains natural silicates that work as an ultra-fine abrasive for that final polish. I like to use both sides, one charged with paste and the other bare. That's easy to do if I leave the leather loose like this. I can just flip it over. But it can be hard to hold on the bench sometimes while you're stropping. So I'm making 2 wood-backed leather strops, one for each side of the leather. Here's what you'll need: a substrate, some leather, some contact cement. I strongly recommend you wear a respirator since few of us can spare any brain cells, a brush to apply it, and a roller. If you don't have a roller, you can use a piece of hardwood. Plywood or MDF make a good substrate. It should be flat without any visible cups or warps, but it doesn't have to be dead on like a lapping plate because leather is soft a little bit, so it makes up for those small inconsistencies. A thick piece of leather is best because it'll last a really long time. You can use scraps from a craft store or a piece of an old leather jacket or bag. Pretty much any tanned leather will work. I buy these pieces online because they're the perfect thickness and consistency in my opinion. I'll put a link below to where I get them if you need a source. Spread a coat of contact cement on with a brush. You don't want it so thick that you'll make a mess, but don't leave it dry either. And be sure to brush out any lumps. Apply the cement to both pieces of wood and both pieces of leather. But remember, one leather will be rough side down, the other smooth side down. Leave the pieces cement side up on the bench and go do something for about 15-20 minutes. You want them dry so they're just a little bit tacky. Then mate your halves together carefully and roll the leather surface to ensure a good bond. Pay extra attention to the edges because that's where they'll try to peel up over time. I made my wood blocks the same size as my leather pieces. You may choose to make your blocks a bit smaller so you don't have to be as careful when you align the leather. Then you can just cut the edges later. And that's pretty much all there is to it. You can begin using your strops immediately. Now let's talk about paste. We've made a more comprehensive tutorial about strops and paste a while back. I'll link to it below if you want more info. But for the sake of keeping it simple, I use this trend mirror paste. On a new strop, I take the time to spread a thin coat all over the rough surface. Not the smooth side of the strop, just the rough one. A thin piece of wood or a plastic glue paddle makes this easier because I can alternate between scraping and spreading and then ensure a consistent layer that's worked down into the leather. By the way, this little jar of paste lasts a long time, but after a couple years it may start to dry out a bit. Don't throw it away. Instead, mix in a couple drops of lapping fluid or a light honing oil. It'll make it good as new. I don't worry too much if it gets a little powdery on the strop itself. The fine powder works just the same as wet paste. If it's falling off, you put too much on anyway. But if it bothers you, you can add another thin layer of paste to moisten it, or even just a couple drops of that lapping fluid, you're good to go. Using a strop is simple. You don't need a jig. Just feel for when your bevel is flat, then tilt the tool a tiny bit upward. Lock your wrists and shift your whole body as you pull it across the strop. By tilting the tool upward a little bit, you ensure that you're working on the cutting edge rather than the heel of the bevel. I like to apply a moderate amount of pressure. There's some give in the leather, but not enough that it's going to round your edge over. I usually do about 10 strokes on the paste side, then a few on the bare leather, and I'm back to work. If you keep your strops nearby as you work at your bench and return to them often, you'll spend a lot less time sharpening with your stones. Don't forget to check out the links below this video for more sharpening resources. You'll be a pro in no time. If you sharpen your tools by hand, do yourself a favor. Try one of Trend's diamond stones. You can start with a card, but before long, you'll want a full bend stone because these things cut fast, they stay perfectly flat, and you can go from stone to strop to wood and be back to work in under a minute. I'll link to my favorites in the notes below this video. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.